Welcome back to Beating a Dead Horse. We're here in the deep mids of the 90s, and I'm your host, way out there dude, Sean McKinda.
And I'm Sonic the Hedgehog.
And you know what? You know what's the raddest thing in the fucking world?
What could that be? Is it me, Sonic the Hedgehog? Available now on the Sega Genesis?
Nah, man, it's Bill and Ted.
Bill and Ted came out in the 80s, though.
Oh, it did, didn't it? This bit fell apart, huh? Editor Sean here with a quick editor's note in my favor. While Bill and Ted did technically come out in the 80s, Excellent Adventure came out in 1989, right on that precipice of the 90s and setting the stage for a radical early 90s. Also, Bogus Journey did come out in 1991, making Bill and Ted at least halfway a 90s series.
Yeah, you had a thing going there. You know, we had a thing going, but then you fucked it up.
Wait, hang on. Let's go back. Let's pretend like that didn't happen, right? Let's pretend like I actually understand how the passage of time works, and am not just an absolute buffoon.
Are you saying this because Bill and Ted's a time travel thing? So you're gonna like redo? Is that the bit?
Yes. I'm definitely that clever.
It's funny because I don't think of the Phantom Menace as a 90s movie. I don't think of.
Wait, I wanted to yell about Pogs for a second.
Well, you missed your chance.
I asked for a chance, you started to give it to me, and then you denied me. A hero denied his homeland.
Hero denied his Pogs.
What's even the point? I could talk about Crazy Bones for a bit. Remember Remember the 90s?
We were just digging through Duncan's old stuff and we found his Crazy Bones. What a fad, dude. Like, I can't believe those existed.
I don't think I ever actually owned Crazy Bones. I think I only got like Burger King kids meal versions of Crazy Bones.
I had a few Crazy Bones. I forgot they came in a coffin and they were indeed bones. Man, what a... Like, we dug up oil for Crazy Bones.
God.
We killed the planet for Crazy Bones.
What the fuck was the point of them?
Wasn't there like a game you could like fling them at each other?
Maybe. That sounds vaguely right, but I don't know. You know what else came in kids' meals?
Jar Jar Binks push pops.
No, not push pops, but definitely Jar Jar Binks. That when he's got his arms in the air and you push his arms on, and his tongue goes, and it's terrible and awful. And I have one. I don't know. I can't remember. It's awful though.
I had a little toy. My favorite little Star Wars toy was actually of the bots that you hit on the nose. I had a little plastic guy. It was a cute little man you could pose.
Oh, that is nice.
No, it was a great toy. I definitely have some hard nostalgia for Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. I always remember thinking this movie, even as a kid, thinking this movie was boring, and I didn't really get into Star Wars until Revenge of the Sith. But that's not true. I did enjoy this movie. I think it was Attack of the Clones more so that kind of made me go like, oh, all right. Because my mother demanded that I tell this story again because she saw The Phantom Menace in theaters 9 times.
Hot damn.
And that second time, she went to the midnight release, but the second time was when she took me and my sister out of school to go see it, which she would do for all big event movies, which in practice ended up being, you know, the Star Wars prequels and Indiana Jones 4 when I was in middle school. And
oh no, that is people have some opinions about all 4 of those movies.
People have some opinions about all 4 of those movies, but I mean, I appreciate my dear mother wanting to share in the joy of cinema. You know, can't take that away from us.
My dad did the same for me for Star Wars Episode 3. He took me out of school. My teacher even gave me, he was the coolest teacher in the world. He gave me this note that's like, Sean will be out of school for like 2 hours, 15 minutes and 37 seconds exactly, or something like that. The runtime of the movie.
What a stand-up guy. What a gentleman.
Yeah, my 5th grade teacher fucking ruled. Sorry, continue with your story.
So we were real young when this movie came out. I was like 4, you know, because this is the very tail end of the 90s, 99. But like possibly the only year of the 90s I really remember at all. And I remember pretty clearly because I used to fall asleep in movies all the fucking time, and this was no exception. So we went to see Phantom Menace twice, and the first time I fell asleep almost immediately and woke up in time for the Darth Maul fight, and I was like, oh, this is neat. The second time, my mom took me back, because of course she did. I sat awake for the whole movie but couldn't keep my eyes open at the very end and fell asleep during the Darth Maul fight. So I saw my first viewing of the Phantom Menace was fragmented and out of order because of my narcolepsy as a child.
That's one way to experience the Phantom Menace for sure. I would love to know, as an adult, what that experience would have been like. If you had, maybe you do remember this better, but we were kids. I can't imagine your memory retention of it was that great.
No, I just I remember it was actually a little disconcerting because I wouldn't realize I'd fallen asleep, and then I'd be I kind of remember feeling wait, weren't we on a spaceship? Why are we fighting? Whatever. And then I just went with it because cool laser sword shit was happening. But it was kind of disconcerting. Like you're questioning your own sanity a little bit.
But also, thankfully, you don't really miss anything when you fall asleep. However, we're actually not here to rag on this movie as much as you might expect us to. And we'll get to that in a minute. But first and foremost, if you're looking at this, you might be like, well, hang on a second. Didn't they already do Star Wars Episode 1? And if you go back, yes, we did do Star Wars Episode 1. Jackson and I, definitely just the two of us, did Star Wars Episode 1. It was a great experience. I think it brought both of us together as podcasters, as friends. We definitely grew closer. It's maybe the best episode Jackson and I have ever recorded of this podcast.
A real Sean plus Jackson production, I tell you what.
Yeah, definitely go check that one out. But why are we doing it now? What's the reason here? Well, if you're just joining us, we are in the middle of blockbuster weeks. We have done Jaws, we have done E.T., and now we are in the late 90s to talk about the biggest grossing summer blockbuster of the 90s, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. If you are unfamiliar with Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, first of all, how did you end up here? What did you misclick on that brought you to this? I'm so sorry.
Hello, Jebediah. How was your escape from the Amish camp?
But if you are somehow unfamiliar with it, Star Wars Episode 1 tells the tale, or the beginning of the tale, of young Anakin Skywalker's rise to Darth Vader through a lot of conversations about trade routes and taxations and the politics of space law that have not previously been established, which is why a lot of people think this movie is bad and boring and weird.
And to be clear, it is all of those things.
Yeah, I was going to say, we just said that we're going to talk this movie up in a lot of ways, but it is bad, boring, and weird. But unfortunately, you're listening to Beating a Dead Horse, where bad, boring, and weird are kind of the things that we look for in movies.
I told the story about, falling asleep in my nostalgia and the fact that I did enjoy this movie because I did to preface, what I'm going to say, what I'm about to say, my fiery hot take that I'm going to give. I preface all this to say that I would rather sit down and watch The Phantom Menace over any of the Disney Star Wars movies because of what a fascinating, weird, delightful, disgusting, idiosyncratic piece of history it is. This is pure George Lucas id for all to see.
I obviously have to pour one out for The Last Jedi, a movie that I still really, really like, and I think is an absolutely fascinating and fantastic Star Wars movie. Beyond that, though, I would probably agree with you, especially Rise of Skywalker. Oh my fucking god. Although that movie genuinely might be interesting to do a post-mortem on again in a chunk of change here. Obviously maybe not on this podcast, but something that might be worth revisiting in a year or two, just because it might reach a level of weirdness akin to Star Wars Episode 1, but for entirely different reasons.
Yeah, the thing about the Disney movies is that what's more strange and fascinating about the Disney movies is how in both cases the story of how something that was so hyped up went so wrong. And like then for the Disney movies, that's mostly like corporate politics reasons.
It's literally opposite reasons too.
Yes.
Like, the prequels and the sequels are about as polar opposite as you can possibly get from one another.
Yes.
Again, I do have to point out that I think that The Last Jedi is in at least some sort of conversation with the prequels, because that movie's all about like how the Jedi are kind of weird people, which is a lot of what especially episode 1 is about, and kind of goes on to further explore through episode 2 and 3. But like, I think The Last Jedi is, again, I like The Last Jedi. I have my thoughts on it. Go listen to that episode. Jackson and I are not going to relitigate The Last Jedi.
No, we're not.
We have done so many times. I just wanted to put that out there because I think that it is still in conversation in a way that the other two around it are not. Because as Jackson said, those are far more motivated by corporate greed and making a movie that appeases everyone. And as I assume Jackson's going to say, the prequels are literally George Lucas at the most George Lucas-id they could possibly be.
And this one in particular, George Lucas didn't have any like uncredited script doctors. I believe this is the only screenplay that is pure George Lucas all the way through. And it's the worst screenplay of all time.
Is he uncredited on THX 88 or whatever it was?
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. I meant the only Star Wars movie. THX was probably all him. But,
yeah, I was curious about that because like I would love to know. I've never seen THX, but I'm kind of curious about it in that thought alone.
I really want to watch his pre-Star Wars movies a lot.
Yeah,
we got maybe we'll do that on the show sometime. But
yeah, that could be fun. But yeah, so that is Star Wars Episode 1. Jackson and I clearly have a lot of nostalgia for it, but I really don't know that clouds our judgment on it too much, because it is, we both could objectively look at this movie and say it is unabashedly a bad movie in almost every way, aside from some really interesting broad strokes ideas.
The visual design, not always the visuals, but like the design of the world is really great, I think.
Yeah, I can see that. I think for Jackson, I actually watched this with some friends of ours, just because this is my third time seeing this movie in I think 4 years or something like that. So it's very fresh on my mind. I'm like, I want to change it up a little bit. I'm going to watch it with some friends of ours. Specifically, one of them I feel like was on the podcast at some point to talk about Star Wars, but that can't be right. So I'm probably just hallucinating in some capacity or another.
Maybe in a parallel universe.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing multiple universes at once, and my brain is splitting as a result of that. But we watched with them, and I was able to kind of half pay attention, and it was fascinating as they're putting out that Star Wars is a single biome per planet. And in some cases that is to its strength, and in some cases that is to its detriment. I think that there is a lot of really interesting designs on Coruscant, and I think that the whole aesthetic of that city-wide planet, it looks really, really cool. But then we go to Naboo, and I think there's a lot of kind of cool aesthetic to Naboo. Like the Gungan area is really cool. Some of the hangar stuff is really cool. The shaft area I think is kind of rad, despite the fact that it is just a big power center with a bunch of shafts in it for some fucking reason. But I think the actual interior of the palace that we see later on in the movie, I think it was really boring and drab looking.
Yes, the interior palace shots are not the most memorable. I like the old world, European look that the city has in general.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess, I don't know. I'm not here to really pick apart what you're saying, just as much as kind of giving some of the thoughts that I had while I was watching it, which is to say that, yeah, I see where you're coming from, but I still think that there are still some big caveats to that as we're going to be talking through this entire movie.
I do think that the visuals and the design are the strongest aspects. There's definitely dated CGI, but
CGI looks rough in some places, that's for sure.
But also it doesn't look so bad in some other places, and there's still a decent amount of real locations and sets, unlike Clones and Revenge of the Sith, which look like cartoons.
What version did you watch? Did you watch the version where Yoda was still a puppet or a CGI?
No, I watched the Disney Plus version, unfortunately.
Okay, yeah, we did too. I was just making sure that we were on the same page with that, because I know watching with our friend who learned English through Star Wars Episode 1 is deeply fascinating, because he can just be like, well, that that's not a thing that was in the original release and that was added because of CGI or whatever. And like, there's just a lot of background stuff because we know it's so dense. It's just such a dense
much going
film.
on in every single shot.
And it's fascinating watching him be like, Yoda's different. He was originally a puppet, and now he's CG to kind of like keep him in line with the later movies, and like that was added in later releases, and like there's some pod racing stuff that got added later on, and like it's fascinating in that way. So I was just curious if we were seeing the same film.
Yeah, no, we watched the same version. The only difference that I really consciously picked up on, I knew they replaced the puppet in like, I think it was the 3D theatrical release they did back in the day. But regardless, yeah, I mean, I kind of love this movie. I think that it's strange. It's such an outlier on this whole blockbuster journey because this is what happens when you give basically a crazy indie filmmaker $1 billion to make a blockbuster. And what you get is the incredibly bold and brash decision to take, like, you know, one of the most famous like action adventure franchises of all time and make it take place in a bunch of rooms about boring space taxes. And
what if this was produced by like A24? Do you think this would have been heralded as like some weird avant-garde fantastic thing?
I do think it's ahead of its time in some ways. This is not to say that it's all right, let's cut to the chase. The biggest problem is that George Lucas can't write his way out of a paper bag. He just can't. And that's on every level, on a structural level, on a character level, on a dialogue level, from top to bottom. George Lucas is not a good writer. He needed to, you know, hire an actual screenwriter and then, you know, talk through his big ideas, and they can, you know, clue into what works, like, you know, adjust it and, you know, do things that would have worked better. Like that's what needed to happen. The biggest problem with this movie is the script. Any amount of apologia that we're going to run for it here, like, no bones about it. Terrible screenplay. Number one problem.
Again, we need to stress that this is not a good movie.
Yeah.
It's just a fascinating movie.
With that said, I think that this was kind of a growing pains blockbuster. Like, it definitely did have a lot of really bold ideas. A lot of really terrible ideas, too. Like, that's the thing. You can't even just say that this movie is mostly good ideas executed poorly. It's like 50% good ideas executed poorly and 50% the worst ideas anyone's ever had executed poorly.
You want to point to every single actor that's not a white dude speaking in it's bog standard, well, not even bog standard, just fucking wooden as fuck English, that they have a really kind of racist accent to them, and they kind of look racist too.
That cringeworthy stuff, yeah. I mean, but like, that's what makes this more frustrating to me, because I was thinking about what would I compare this to nowadays that's a movie, because honestly, the closest comparison that I can think of is that, like, you know, we don't see...
Wait for it.
Yeah, I know.
Wait
You know what's
for
coming. You all know what's
it.
coming. The closest comparison, I think, is Metal Gear Solid 4.
There it is, ladies and gentlemen. We have Metal Gear Solid. It's here, all Metal Gear Solid.
But I was trying to think of movies that were, you know, comparisons. Like, when was the last time that we had a big budget movie that was this crazy of a disaster that had like good ideas but completely mishandled? I honestly think, like, contemporarily, the best comparison would be like a Batman versus Superman.
What if I get real wild with it?
All right, lay it on me.
I'm worried that y'all are just gonna roll your fucking eyes at this. What about Cats?
Cats is a good example too. It's a little different because Cats is so cynical, I think.
You do have to, well, okay, I don't know that I necessarily agree with the cynical side of things to it.
I'm going with the Lindsay Ellis interpretation of, like, Tom Hooper was just trying to win another Oscar. That's what I mean by cynical.
Okay, potentially. I don't know that I entirely agree with that interpretation of it. I mean, for full context, please go listen to our Cats episode. You will learn a lot about cats, yourself, and me, and probably leave that episode a changed person for I was going to say better or worse, but it's definitely for worse. You're going to leave that episode a worse person having listened to it. But it might explain some of my thoughts on, like, this was a huge budget movie from a lauded director. I mean, Thomas Hooper is lauded in heavy air quotes in this situation.
I mean, he is an Academy Award winner, several-time Academy Award winner, so I think that counts.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at, though, with the air quotes. Like, he's lauded in that way, but, like, there's a lot of people who really don't like him for a lot of his movies because they are bad. Surprise, surprise. So, like, I think that's kind of more what I'm getting at, is, like, he was then given a shit ton of money. It turned into this wild disaster. The difference is that no one really expected this movie. Like, people were expecting Phantom Menace to be good. No one really expected Cats to be good after that first trailer.
Yeah, I think that, like, in order to approximate and, like, fully understand, like, how about this? I think in order to really wrap your head around just how fucking crazy the Phantom Menace is, it is like Batman versus Superman plus Cats, because neither one completely encompasses.
Yeah, I think that works. You got to have the context of both of them and smash them together, and that's about what this is.
Because as I was sort of saying, like, when I think about Batman versus Superman, that movie's more frustrating. Like, when I think about that movie's good ideas, it's like, oh, it's so frustrating because there's a decent number of them, but everything is just so bad. Whereas, like, this movie, like, I don't have time to be frustrated by the good ideas because something else, like, will happen in every scene. There's something incredibly baffling happening, whether that's like,
and that's the Cats part.
And that's the Cats part, exactly. Like, you know, it's something weird is always going on. This is a boring movie, but because it's so baffling, like, I remember being way more bored. I haven't seen this movie in a hot minute since I was in, like, college, but this time, I was almost never bored watching this. Like, it was always giving me something to noodle about.
My boredom, as I said, mostly came from the fact that this is my third time seeing this movie in like 4 years, and I just kind of hit a point where I'm like, I've seen this 3 times in the past 4 years. I've seen this 20 times outside of that. I know how this movie goes. I know how Star Wars Episode 1 is. Right. I grew up with it. So, like, I think it kind of hit that point of boredom because I had basically all of the realizations that you had this time last time I watched it. I mean, I honestly was having these realizations back in high school when I was rewatching it, and, like, had a weird appreciation for the prequels for the reasons that we're going to talk about here. And that on the broad strokes, on the whole idea, there's a lot of stuff that I really like. Like, hot take, I like the Palpatine shit. I like this whole, like, galaxy brain space politics nonsense throughout all 3 of these movies. I genuinely like it. It's garbage, but I love it.
It's funny because there are people who say, like, you could never make that work in a Star Wars movie. But, like, one of the reasons that I say the movie was kind of ahead of its time, at least in conception, was that, like, without sort of the baggage of, you know, knowing how execution-wise the prequels turned out, if you said, oh, we're going to do like a Star Wars political thriller, we're going to do a Song of Ice and Fire in space, everyone would, like, raise their eyebrows in interest. Like, okay, go on. Like, what do you got for me? That sounds great.
This movie has a lot, actually, in comparison. We were talking about A Song of Ice and Fire completely unrelated before we dove into Star Wars. And when we started talking about it in our pre-discussion, we both kind of clicked and went, it's really good that we talked about that beforehand, because The Song of Ice and Fire, the books, not so much the show, are a really good reference point for how Star Wars Episode 1 works, and that the books are written in a very detached, omniscient narrator type of perspective. They're nothing about it feels like a preference for one character over the other. We're just watching these things unfold in front of us, and I love those books for it. They feel like we're reading a more personal history book in a lot of ways. It's great for that. And that is a lot of what Star Wars Episode 1 is. It is a lot of just, like, letting the characters say their thoughts, act out how they're feeling, and just the camera is impartial through almost all of it. It is just kind of there watching things happen and letting you form your opinions about it, much in the same way that Ice and Fire is.
You know, that would be really great. But of course, the core difference between The Phantom Menace and A Song of Ice and Fire is that A Song of Ice and Fire, at the end of the day, still has really strong characters, which this does not. Although some of the Plinkett memes.
Editor Sean dipping back in just to say that if you're unfamiliar with what Jackson's talking about, this is in reference to the Mr. Plinkett videos from Red Letter Media that dissect Star Wars, all 3 episodes in in-depth analysis. We'll have a link in the description below if you want to go check it out.
Like, the whole, like, the movie doesn't have a main character bit is something that gets pointed to a lot. And it's like, that's that's kind of true, but that's something that doesn't necessarily have to be bad. Like if we got
Song of Ice and Fire,
Exactly.
which does not have a main character in any of the books. If you have only seen the movies, you are like, or the shows, you're like, what are you talking about? There's definitely a main character. Jon Snow, Arya, all those folks. They are not main characters. They are treated with the same detachment as every single other fucking person in that book series. It is so good, and it works. It works really, really well.
But the difference here, of course, is that the characters themselves. It's not even that every impulse is bad. Although I will say the one thing that, like, if we're pulling from Plinkett memes, probably the best observation made in that video is like how backwards it is to have Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have the roles that they do. Obi-Wan should have been the main character, or at least a main character, the focal point. He's totally not. It's totally Qui-Gon. And that's, on the one hand, I actually like Liam Neeson, and like he's got a decent amount of charm even in this. But at the same time, like if you kind of think, the prequels going forward, we're trying to establish Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Padme, like they're going to be kind of our Luke, Han, Leia for this trilogy. And, structurally, if you cut out all the Jar Jar focus, of which there is a lot, and you combine the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon stories, there actually is, like, pretty clearly, like, Amidala's got her storyline, Anakin's got his storyline, and Obi-Wan's got his storyline. And, like, that could have been really good, but the actual execution of the writing is embarrassing.
I mean, I don't know that So let me start again, because it was clearly about to say that I don't know that I necessarily believe that, because the truth is that I don't know that I necessarily believe that in a hypothetical world where 2 and 3 followed up on some of the ideas set forth by Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's relationship in this movie.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just more so that, like, you could still have, not to get rid of Qui-Gon, like, I think you could still have Qui-Gon, but maybe balance them out a little bit better, because Obi-Wan does literally nothing in this movie.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. No, I'm with you on that one. I wasn't looking at it from that perspective. Yeah, I'm on the other board.
Yeah, no, more so that we've got, like, the Jedi thread, the Anakin thread, and the Naboo thread, because those are kind of, things that are going to be important going forward. Then we have the Gungas, who are not going to be important going forward.
I am going to pause us right here, because I honestly don't know that we're ever actually going to hit spoilers in this movie, because this is a conversation that we're going to be having far more about the broad stroke stuff. If we do hit spoilers, we will give you a quick warning for it. It will probably be way down the road. We got a lot of just broad stuff to talk about that normally we blow through in 5 minutes in our pre-spoiler discussion. So I'm going to pause this right here to just say, if you're enjoying the podcast, leave us a review on iTunes, tell a friend about us. It's the only way we grow. Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. Jackson, tell them about your book.
Buy my book. It's called Kelly is Unbreakable. It's great. Better written than The Phantom Menace, that's for damn sure.
Next week, get ready for this one. We're talking about Shrek 2, and we'll explain how we landed on that next week. But, like, I mean, it should be pretty clear if you're looking at, like, the Blockbuster thing and our history. It's a really easy one to figure out, y'all. But we're just talking about Shrek 2, not Shrek 1. Nowhere in here we're going to talk about Shrek 1. It's only Shrek 2. Just Shrek 2.
Just as God intended. I guess we should clarify also, someone's going to point out that The Phantom Menace is only the second highest grossing summer blockbuster of the 90s. And we know that.
We're aware.
But we're doing a thing. So trust us on that one.
Yeah, not next week. The week after that, you'll understand. We promise.
Anyway.
So let's get back into it. Yes. Do we want to talk about the Gungans, or do we want to kind of move past that?
I mean, we can kind of move past that, because I don't know if I have anything particularly insightful to say about the Gungans and Jar Jar Binks. Only in that, like, it's unreal, like, not for completely different reasons. Like, it's unreal that George Lucas made his Star Wars prequel about space taxes, but it's also unreal that Jar Jar Binks exists and he is the way it is, but, like, for opposite reasons. Like, the space taxes are, like, a good idea gone bad, and Jar Jar Binks is, like, the pinnacle, like, easiest to grasp example of a bad idea gone bad.
Yeah, and these two ideas are really what I think a lot of people grab onto, as well as, who the fuck is this movie for type of question.
Yeah, it was for George Lucas. That's who it was for.
Yeah, no, entirely. Because as a kid, as a kid in the 90s, you liked Jar Jar Binks. I have no idea how kids today feel about Jar Jar Binks.
I actually will say this movie worked decently for me as a kid because I did like enjoy the Anakin stuff. Like I did feel like, oh, I want to be a little boy going on an adventure. So that was working as planned, I guess.
The pod racing stuff still fucking slaps.
Pod racing slaps. It's a great set piece, great world building, great set piece.
I argue some of that is the nostalgia of looking at that and being like, I could do that. It's me, Sean, at age 6. I'm gonna go be a pod racer. But it is also genuinely just a great fucking scene.
It's creative, like it sets up, Kid Anakin. I disagree with the notion that like Anakin in this is a bad character because he's a kid. In fact, I think there's a lot of pathos to the idea, like that one poster of like, Anakin leaving home with the backpack and like his shadow's Darth Vader. Like there's a lot of pathos in that idea.
All right, I will even defend the "Are you an angel?" line in this fucking movie because it feels like something a kid would say who doesn't understand the outside world. It gets mocked so much. It is admittedly, you know what it is? You know what it is?
Give it to me.
It's a Martha.
It is 100% a Martha. It's 100% a Martha.
It's a line that is poorly written and poorly executed, but the idea underneath it makes sense. It's a good idea, poorly executed.
I would actually say my biggest problems, I think Anakin has the closest to a coherent storyline in this. I've really got two big gripes with it, aside from just like, the acting and the directing. And, I'm not going to roast the actor because he was a kid. He did the best he could.
He does not deserve what he got.
I know, that poor bastard. Like, that should have been an amazing experience. Like, I got to be, Anakin. I got to be one of the most iconic characters in cinema, and it ruined his fucking life. So, I know we all know this now, but it's also a shame that people bullied Jar Jar's actor for this because he went through the same thing. Like, that was so shitty.
Yeah, no, that fucking sucks shit too, but Jar Jar's actor is still doing well and still in the Star Wars universe as like a voice actor all over the place.
I did not know that. Well, I'm happy for poor Jake Floyd.
He is still out here in doing the Star Wars Jedi Temple Challenge, that like fucking Ninja Warrior shit for young kids to do. And he's like Jedi Master Kelleran Beck. So he's still very much a part of the Star Wars universe in a lot of really weird ways.
My man, I'm glad to hear that. But no, so I think my biggest gripes with the Anakin storyline are, one, like, I don't think it's, it is like, corny that Anakin blows up the ship and like plays a part, and even though he's just this little kid, I think that's fine. Like, it is still at the end of the day, like, Star Wars is corny. There's a certain level of corniness involved. I think that's
in all
fine.
of them, like, or
yes.
The new ones are a little bit less so, I would argue. But like the original set and the prequels are all very corny. Like, oh my god, when the fucking Amidala and her royal guard use the guns to rise up like James fucking Bond or other like Flash Gordon ass serials. Oh, they're so good.
No, it's so good. So like I want a certain level of corniness in my Star Wars movies, and so I'm fine with that. What more sucks is that instead of it being like a character thing, like, I mean, one, Qui-Gon is insane for bringing this child to the battlefield. That is still true. But more so should have been like this would have been appropriate for his character. Like, oh, I'm frustrated. Like, I want to help out, and I want to help out Padme, and I can't do anything about it. Qui-Gon's keeping me back because it's dangerous. I'm going to sneak away and like hide on the battlefield, and then I'm going to, get in the fucking cockpit. It should have been more.
Kind of what he does too, because he does make a line of like, well, Qui-Gon told me I have to stay in the ship. Ain't I a stinker?
Yeah, no, I liked that line. I liked that, but like I would have wanted a more active thing. Mostly because Qui-Gon, it is genuinely insane that Qui-Gon brought him along at all.
Yes, it is.
But so there's that. Also, I think like I understand why they didn't make Anakin's like slave background like worse, but if they didn't say Anakin was a slave, you wouldn't know it. Like, you would think Watto was just his boss. Because, like, yeah, Watto's kind of scummy, but he's not that bad of a guy, all told. Like, he lets them have their little house, like, talks to him just like he's any other worker. Like, I think that, like, to have that angle of where we have a kid who's, rising from a bad situation. There's even some lines that he has that like show, he's a little more street smart even at a young age than pampered, bored rural boy Luke was in A New Hope. Like I like that angle, but as far as like Anakin rising out of slavery, the slavery that he rises out of, it isn't noticeably bad enough for that to have a real impact. And I think that's a problem, especially because that like edge of darkness to his character is supposed to like foreshadow the downfall, so to speak.
And there's not really a whole lot of darkness in here at all. I mean, even when the Jedi Council are interrogating his darkness, you're like, this kid just kind of feels like a kid. I get, fear leads to hate leads to yada, 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 yada. Thanks, Yoda. But at the same time, it's just, I never felt like he was dangerous. He just kind of felt like a little twerp to me the whole time.
Yeah. Like why... It almost feels like, the Jedi are just rejecting him because we as the audience know he's going to be Darth Vader.
Yeah. I mean, okay, we are clearly Star Wars dorks in a lot of way, and I was going to say it's time to unveil that, but you don't need to be told that given the conversation we are having. There is, like, strictly speaking, rules as to why he could not be, and if the movie had further explored that, I think it would have made more sense, but they don't really talk as much about the fact that they don't take children of his age. Like, they start children off really young, and I think there's, like, one or two lines to it really quick, but if we had dug into that a bit more and like had some actual conflict around that could have led to something. But the fact that they're trying to like imply this darkness that just isn't there on screen is kind of rough.
Well, and it's also because at this point in the story, it will become clearer in the prequels that the Jedi Order like has problems and they can be quite unreasonable thanks to their rigid ideology. That's not super clear here at the moment, if we're supposed to feel that way or not.
Yeah, I mean, I like that as an idea of like sowing the seeds here and kind of starting to break it as this trilogy continues forward. But like, I honestly don't even really remember that much of an exploration of the issues with the Jedi Order as the series goes on. It kind of just feels like almost like a C plot, not even a B plot as much, for Anakin's rise and his anger with the Jedi, which doesn't feel as much of a condemnation of the Jedi as much as it feels like a condemnation of how he views it. Especially, he mostly feels, to me, in my most recent viewing, which has been a bit more of just kind of spoiled and like, I want things now, and that's how he's portrayed through it, especially like the whole time he's like, I should be a Jedi Master, I should have taken this already, and it doesn't feel like a condemnation of the ideology as much as just him wanting. In
the second one I agree, in the second one he's a total brat, and the third one I think it's a little more nuanced because like the Jedi are asking him to like spy on Palpatine and like do all this stuff and like all his very reasonable, like, questions about Padme. He goes to, like, seek guidance from Yoda and is basically told, like, fuck all.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I haven't seen episode 3 in a long fucking time, but I did watch episode 2 for no explicable reason last year.
No, in episode 2, it's definitely more that he's just a little shit. I think in 3, it's more purposeful. And I think this because if it's not purposeful, it's still, like, death of the author style, like a theme throughout the movie, because the thing that makes Luke more of a hero than Anakin is that he is in touch with his feelings and like he does look out for the people that he cares about, and that like he does give Darth Vader a chance when all the other Jedi were like, you got to take your personal feelings out of it and kill him. So that's sort of like in touch with or without the personal aspect. It feels like a theme, intentional or not, across the broad scope of the entire series. But
no, that's totally fair. As I said, it was just more something that when I was getting granular with it, I was starting to lose sight of.
It's funny to me that like, I think a lot of it just comes down to like people don't like Anakin because he's a little kid in this, and little kids are annoying. And I mean, I don't like kids, so I'm right there with you. But when I was a little kid, I think it's a testament to the fact that like it's the closest thing the movie has to a genuinely working storyline, because I remember like when I was that age, like being invested in that story, like the Anakin stuff, the Tatooine stuff was always, aside from the Darth Maul laser sword fight, of course. But like, that was the stuff that stuck out to me that I remembered. And, it was only after we kind of lost that and, when Anakin grew up, when I was like, oh, this Attack of the Clones. I don't really care about this anymore. Attack of the Clones is the worst one, guys. It's not the Phantom Menace. It is objectively Attack of the Clones.
Can I actually just take this really quick? You mentioned the Darth Maul sword fight towards the end there. And just say that I kind of like the sword fighting in this movie. It's not as chaotic as the sword fighting in the original trilogy, nor even the sequels, but like there is some flow to it that feels far more representative of the time period. Like there's a lot more balance to it, and the fact that it would have been a tradition at this point for the Jedi to fight in a kind of a more dancing way does make some sense. And this is just me admittedly trying to make sense of why I like the dance fighting, when in fact I think it is just I kind of like the choreography in this. It is dance fighting, but I don't know.
It's definitely a well choreographed scene. It's definitely a good set piece on like a visual angle. I mean, I like the scene for that reason as well. I do agree with the criticisms that like would have been nice if there was a, you know, even just a bit more, like, you know, forget the fact that Darth Maul's not a character, you know, even putting that aside. So the fact that there's no narrative weight around that fight in particular is already a big problem. But I do think that like a little bit more characterization through the choreography could have been established, but I mean it's a memorable fight for a reason, and also a big part of that is the music.
Duel of the Fates, baby. Oh my god, the soundtrack in this movie is so fucking good, and it's so much heavy lifting.
John Williams did not come to play. He did not.
We are 3 for 3 on John Williams soundtracked movies at this point, and I think there's literally going to be one exception to that. I don't know whether he did the 2010s movie that we're going to talk about, but
he is at least featured. A composition is at least featured in the 2010s movie.
So welcome to John Williams weeks, actually, everybody. Our one person is Shrek, and that's the one that he didn't do.
What a fucking madman, dude. Like any one of like his most iconic songs would be a career highlight. Almost every single like movie he's worked on has one of the most iconic pieces of music of all time. Dude's a lunatic.
I'm really disappointed. I did just quickly Google to see if he has any credits on Shrek, and he does not. I was hoping that like some sort of slim chance is like, yeah, I contributed a piece to the Shrek movie just for that summer blockbuster of it all, and he does not. I'm so disappointed.
Or they play a little bit of Duel of the Fates at the end there.
Yes, something, anything. Just tie it into Shrek. We'll find a way. We'll find a way next week.
We'll find a way. Shrek was too busy getting Counting Crows.
Oh god. So I want to talk really quick about something that I did notice. This is the id of George Lucas in every way, and we've talked a little bit about Flash Gordon, the corniness around that. But like Akira Kurosawa, if you've been listening to our episodes, we've talked a lot about how it influenced George Lucas, and there is no place more clear than right here on how Kurosawa influenced Lucas in every way, shape, and form. Mostly in how this whole movie is shot and structured, because everyone in this movie is kind of wooden in a way that I don't know if you would necessarily agree with this, but it was something that I was kind of thinking about, is like those old samurai movies, there's a lot of personality and life to them, but like there is also a lot of conversations that are just very, this is a thing that is happening back and forth in a very, I don't want to call it wooden, but like stoic, poignant way that I think Lucas is really trying to go for here.
I think we talked about this a bit when we talked about either Seven Samurai or Sanjuro, because like a lot of
I'm willing to bet we did.
Yeah, a lot of that is just the way, you know, the Japanese language is structured. And so what maybe sounds a little bit short or curt or wooden is just like, you know, in Japanese, when you want to convey an idea, like you use the minimum amount of words possible as a broad rule.
We've definitely talked about this, if nothing else, when we were talking about the Godzilla versus Kong, the new movie, when we were talking about how Japanese, like, as someone who myself understands a little bit of Japanese and sign language, you see them sign something or you just hear them say something. You're like, okay, I know that what they just said was yes. And the subtitles for it are, you know, yes, I agree with that course of action or something like that, which is actually what George Lucas would have taken to put in this fucking movie.
Yep.
You would have taken the subtitles. Yeah. So it's fascinating in that way. Beyond that too, a lot of this is just structured how Kurosawa would have, and you can feel it in the way that scenes are framed, where people are just kind of standing there looking at one another and having conversations. It's very Kurosawa in positioning and shot construction. It's fascinating. It's really interesting to watch if you're watching Kurosawa films, to then go watch Star Wars Episode 1 and just feel how much George Lucas loved Kurosawa. And I get it, dude. I get it.
No, I mean, God bless him. God bless George Lucas. You know, clearly some kind of egomaniac, because no one dared to tell him no on anything in this movie. And what we got was such a pure beating heart of a movie.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I want to double back and talk about those wooden performances some more, because I kind of love them. Aside from like everything else going on around it, like the Kurosawa of it all and the potential like language barrier and subtitles and everything like that, there's something so fucking bold and brash and also belongs in the trash about having literally everyone in your movie spend the entire time going, "Yes, Watto, I do think that is an agreeable thing, but may I present an alternative option to your gambling that we are suggesting here? If I win, in fact, I will take both the slaves that you have if you win." And like, that's the entire conversation. You maintain a monotone the entire fucking time. And it doesn't matter who you are, whether you are a politician, a Jedi, the only spots of levity are Anakin and Jar Jar. And they are so fucking jarring that every time Anakin goes, "Yippee!" I can't help but laugh at it because it's so out of left field in this fucking movie.
It's actually a pretty meaningful difference between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, and I feel like on some level George Lucas, you know, whether he knew it or not, I think that like to some degree, the direction of like having the really flat wooden dialogue was intentional, because like,
especially in juxtaposition. All right, hang on. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off a little bit here, but like the juxtaposition of Anakin and Jar Jar as being active would work really well to set the stage for the politicians and Jedi of this world are following an ideology that is unsustainable and unhealthy for the universe.
Yeah.
When the children are like, it's so jarring. Sorry, continue. Like, that is, I have no idea whether that was intentional, but I made the argument. It's a thing that you can do.
Well, because like back when people used to get into big stinky fights about whether the prequels were bad, back before the Disney movies, you know, people would say like, oh, the acting in the prequels is just like the acting in the original trilogy, and that's not necessarily true. The acting in the original trilogy is not like superb by any means, but if anything,
if you can different type of bad,
it's the opposite problem. Everyone in general, I'd say it's like for a broader audience, it's the better problem to go for, where like people are kind of overacting, like everyone's a little too emotional, like
we're giving it 110%.
Yeah, and like you could say what you will about Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, but you can't say that he doesn't have enthusiasm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's at 110%. It comes out in every way, shape, and form, and I think that's why people got so attached to these people, because even if they are bad, they are giving it their fucking all, and you can only respect people who give it them.
Charming.
It's charming, and you like people who really just put their heart and soul into everything. There's something really attractive about that too. I mean, I don't know, I can't say everyone, but everyone.
So I don't know if the wooden acting was because, you know, Lucas was making a purposeful decision. Because again, you know, your Jar Jars and your Anakins are much more like your like your Mark Hamills in terms of like what they're going for. And I don't know if that's just because like there was nobody else on set to give like extra direction when Lucas just said say the line and then fucked off to drink his coffee, or like if it was on purpose. I don't know, but like it's a meaningful difference between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy.
And it is an interesting question to wonder whether it is a reaction to the response from the original trilogy or something that Lucas just wanted to approach with.
Yeah, Lucas seems like kind of like in interviews and like stuff that he says, he seems like kind of a stoic, a little bit of a, you know, distant guy. Not to say anything about his personality, I don't know the man, but in his demeanor, that's certainly how it seems.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
It's fascinating. It's fascinating. We're starting to brush against time here. We've got a little bit of time left if we have anything else we want to say, I feel like we hit a lot of the broad strokes here, because this movie's all broad strokes unless we want to sit down and nitpick every line and pick out every idiosyncrasy about the movie. And
yeah, I mean, that's sort of the thing, is that like everyone's seen that fucking Plinkett video, and you know that video was a groundbreaking YouTube video. I'm not here to diss the Plinkett video. Like, I think that a lot of video essays today wouldn't exist without it, and I think a lot of points that he makes are still really, really good and valid. But you know, I think that when you're talking about the Phantom Menace, it is like such a weird singular movie that there's still plenty to talk about aside from that well-trodden ground. And I think that's one of the things that makes it such a fascinating little movie.
Yeah.
It's like the outlier on our blockbuster butts. Like, this is an indie film with a couple $1 million budget. Like,
and this is also why we didn't talk about Star Wars in the 80s, because we knew that this was coming up, and we felt it'd be more interesting to talk about episode 1 than the original Star Wars. So here we are.
Here we are.
But midichlorians, though, right?
The midichlorians, I mean, that, again, you know, lots of good decisions, lots of bad decisions. That was indeed an extremely bad decision.
I honestly, okay, I guess this is an episode of hot takes, obviously.
I was going to
say,
oh, my man's about to mount a defense of the midichlorians. Have at it.
Defense is not the word. Ambivalent shrug is the word. I actually don't think it's that big of an issue, mostly because when I was a kid, I was far more of the, I want to know how everything works type of person.
Yeah.
I am far from that now. I kind of like having some mystery and just being like, yeah, no, there's magic in this world. Don't fucking ask why. It doesn't fucking matter. That's not the point of anything going on here. But like, as an answer, it didn't really bother me. I didn't really care either way. And I mean, even today, I'm like, yeah, I mean, who really cares? It doesn't really change that much about like the subject of any of these movies. It's just kind of silly and daft and weird.
It's lame, but it's not a movie ruiner for sure.
Yeah. And for so many people it was, and I just, again, that's why I'm just like a big ambivalent. I don't really care it doesn't matter.
I think the midichlorians, like a lot of things, were just one of the easiest concrete details to grab onto instead of explaining the weird amalgamation of what is wrong with the movie if you didn't like it.
That is totally fair, because this is it took us an hour to get out the fact that we kind of like this movie, and we had to hedge everything we said in an acknowledgement that this is terrible.
It's funny because like I do kind of love it. And that love is, it's not even in like the Room way. Like, I'm just here to point and laugh. I mean, I am pointing and laughing, a lot of the time, but not all the time. And I think that just the fact that I was sitting there and kind of taking it all in, having just that dash of like nostalgia for some of the shots and some of the atmosphere, to like sitting, there like a cozy blanket and then noodle over some weird, crazy fucking thing that happens. I mean, I do kind of love it.
And I mean, that does get into why on some watches I will absolutely adore this movie, and on the next watch I'll be like, this is the most boring movie in the fucking world. Just entirely dependent on what my mood is that day, and it says a lot about this movie because it is both of those things at the exact same time. I really do think that I alternate between I love it, I hate it, I love it, I hate it every time I watch it.
The Phantom Menace truly is the duality of man.
It really, really is. And more people need to sit down and appreciate it and not just rail against the bad things that it does, because there's a lot of really fascinating stuff in it.
Yeah, because it's not bad. Like, they don't make movies like this very often. Mm-hmm. Like, the ways that the Phantom Menace is bad, I mean, it takes a combination of two of, like, the most legendary, like, spectacular disasters of modern, big budget filmmaking to even come close to how crazy the Phantom Menace is. And I think that's beautiful in its own way.
And the fact that it's still culturally relevant speaks a lot to it, because if this, I don't know. I don't know whether this movie would still be in conversation as much if a lot of things didn't happen around it. There's just so much to this fucking series that is insane. Including the fact that it even happened beyond the episode 4. Like, that is a thing that at the time shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Star Wars is such I think what I love so much about Star Wars nowadays. Like, I'll always love 5 of those first 6 movies for different reasons.
I hate Attack of the Clones. It's coarse and rough. It gets everywhere. Unlike you.
I mean, I don't know. I have to watch Attack of the Clones again because I do remember having a great deal of fun pointing and laughing at it. Like, that would be a more straightforward The Room style viewing because it is the worst romance ever made.
I admit that there are still parts of Attack of the Clones that I find fascinating. I don't know whether it was just like the mindset I was in when I watched it last or whatever. Like, it's definitely, much like this, it's definitely boring, but there are still some weird broad stroke stuff that are kind of interesting. I mean, like the microcosm of that, Dexter Jetster. What the fuck was any of that?
I love Dexter Jetster.
But it's so, like, it is such a weird, off-the-wall, bad piece of world building that still somehow kind of works.
It's like, it's so funny because, like, Dexter Jetster, a lot of Attack of the Clones, I had forgotten, like, just in general. It's the Star Wars movie that if you ask me to, like, name plot details or, like, summarize it, it's probably the movie I can tell you the least about. But I'll tell you what, I always clearly remember Dexter Jetster.
I can still weirdly tell you a lot about Attack of the Clones. I don't know why, but like that movie is largely ingrained in my brain as well. And it's a waste of space, I'll tell you that much. But again, I don't know. It's kind of fascinating. These movies are fascinating. If you can get over all the nonsense and bad stuff about it, I kind of recommend them highly. I have a friend who honestly I think likes these movies more than the original trilogy just because of the way she got into Star Wars and the weird relationship that these characters have. It's wild.
I used to like it more than the original trilogy for sure. At least 1 and 3, definitely 3. 3 was my favorite movie of all time for a while.
Well, she just got into Star Wars last year, and I think that they are still her favorite movies. So,
wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah,
I would like to pick her brain about that. Honestly, I mean, I think the bottom line is just that, like, do we miss George Lucas yet? Yes, we do, because the ways that movies turn out bad now are so often not nearly as interesting as like a crazy man making a crazy movie. It's just, you know, some boring Disney production line going wrong somewhere. And then occasionally you get to laugh at Cruella's mom getting dogged.
So just to give you a quick synopsis of my friend's thoughts of the Star Wars movies. It's super short, but I texted the group chat just to be like, Sam is watching Star Wars Episode 1 for the first time, and mostly complaining about it. And she just responded, lol, they're not good movies, give up Sean. And then responded, prequels are my favorite Star Wars movie, but not because they're good or coherent.
Now that's a Chad statement. That's a flex.
So, mad fucking respect.
It's a power move. It's a power move for sure.
On a related note, I was talking with her because Twitter was talking about Star Wars like side projects for a little bit. And Star Wars Detours was brought up by Jenny Nicholson, YouTuber Jenny Nicholson, and I had to look it up. And if you have no idea what Star Wars Detours is, that's for a reason. There are 39 produced and created episodes ready to be released, and they have been since around 2012, 2013, and they're never getting released. Seth Green headed it. That's all you really need to know about it. Look it up. There are clips from it. It looks so awful.
It looks like I've got some investigating of my own to do.
I'll attach a link for you people in the description of the episode if you want to just hate everything that you're looking at.
I'll say this. I have been genuinely excited about a Star Wars thing for the first time because Trigger's doing a Star Wars anime.
That was it. It was that. That's what we were talking about. We were talking about the Trigger anime, and then this came up on Twitter because of it, and we started talking about this instead, and it was a poor decision to start talking about. It's awful. Are we done here?
I think we're done here.
Follow me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. Who knows? I'll probably tweet about Star Wars Detours at some point.
Follow me on Twitter at Jackson J. Keller, but just kidding. Go buy my book on Amazon. Kelly is Unbreakable first. Better written than any Star Wars prequel. I'm confident in saying that. Doesn't mean you'll enjoy it more than a Star Wars prequel, but I think by any reasonable metric, I am a better writer than George Lucas. I'm just going to say it.
I mean, you did somehow manage to write the worst Sand line. I think you said like sand sucks and is stupid and I hate it in your book. So I don't know that I agree with you on that.
It just doesn't have quite that poetry, that rhyme that coarse and rough and irritating does it?
It does not. And to be clear, I am kidding. Go buy his book. It's fantastic. And I will agree that it is better written than the Star Wars prequels. So go do that, please.
High praise.
Follow us on Twitter at BADH_cast. Support us on Patreon, patreon.com/BADHcast. We got bonus episodes going up soon. And we got a backlog of bonus episodes for you to check out. There's a shit ton in there. Go listen to those. Also, thanks to our $10 patrons.
Thank you so much, Julia, Travis, Pat, Mom, Aunt Summer. Y'all are great. You're the best. I hope you were satisfied with your presence on this one, Mom. I know you probably did not take kindly to the amount of Phantom Menace roasting that did happen.
There was a lot. But again, we try to be really positive about it anyway. We like this movie weirdly enough. It's bad, but we like it.
We're bringing balance to the Phantom Menace discourse, all right?
Also, thanks to those that have used their theme song is Suicide alternate take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. They're a wonderful band. You should go check them out wherever you can. Buy their music, stream their music, support them, Bandcamp, Spotify, all those good places. Do it now. Also, thanks to 5yearslaterstate.com. There's a little bonus in the corner that you can absolutely click on. But you should go check out all the fantastic people doing a bunch of really fantastic writing while you're there. Next week, we finally reach the 2000s. And what is more 2000s than Shrek 2?
Sean, I just have one question for you before we go.
Yes.
Where have all the good men gone? And where are all the gods? Where's the streetwise Hercules to fight the rising odds?
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go